have to report. He didn't know how wise his mother was.
Well, he said, so I'm like, well, tell me what you learned. So exactly what he said, that if you give your true amount of maaser, then Hashem will give it back to you tenfold, and that you're allowed to test him on it, but nothing else. So, yeah.
Exactly.
So it's real.
Exactly. So he had nachas from you and you had nachas from him.
I had nachas from him. I don't know if he was so impressed with me, but whatever.
Yeah, I thought he was. His mother knows the Gemara like cold, like when he's just learning. That's how he's supposed to look at it. Ma, you're getting such an education in your old age.
Yeah, I don't know.
So it could be. I mean, I don't think Shira went anywhere. Maybe she did. I have no clue. I didn't ask. Anyway,
she might be in Florida. I don't know if but she travels.
Maybe. I didn't ask.
Okay.
I didn't ask. Okay, so we're gonna get started.
Is anyone else on?
No, but you're on. So we're
glad. Oh no, then what? If it's just me, take the night off. That's silly.
Okay. You see, Miriam said I gotta get on because otherwise Yal's gonna get off.
Who's on, Miriam? Who?
Miriam Jacobs. Okay, so now we can start, right? It's two people. We're allowed to start.
I'll put on a hat. All right, I'll be from.
Good. Always better. You want Hashem's blessings. The more you do it his way, the more the blessings come down. And then the more you do it his way, the more the blessings come down.
But there's no halacha to cover your hair in your own house. Right?
I don't know. I understand.
I believe that's what I learned. You don't have to cover your hair in your own house. You don't have. Yes.
I don't know. You have to ask your rabbi because I'm not telling you the halacha.
Okay.
But what I can tell you is, even if your rabbi holds that, definitely, I know I have to cover my hair in my house. Mm-hmm. But even if your rabbi holds that, it still doesn't take away the blessing factor. Covering hair is the only thing I've ever seen where it says literally in 3 places in the Zohar that it not only brings blessings to your children, it even brings blessings to your grandchildren. Right. So it's that powerful.
The Gemara says
even if you don't have to, and I'm not saying you don't have to, because again, from my version of the story, you do have to, but maybe your rabbi says you don't have to. But for sure, the blessings are going to come down the more your hair is covered.
It's not my rabbi; it's how I learned it a long time ago in Israel.
Ask your rabbi.
And the Gemara says that what's it called? You only have to cover it in your chatzer, or not in your chatzer. No, you only have to cover it in the shuk, but not in your chatzer, right? Isn't that a Gemara?
I don't know if that's how we pass halacha. I'm just saying I don't want to step anywhere because it might be an area where, like, as I was always taught it in all my years, you have to cover it in your house. But I'm not disagreeing that maybe some people learn the halacha differently.
I am positive the halacha is you do not have to cover in your own house. A lot of people do, but
yeah, and I'm saying you could be right. I'm not at all.
All right.
Not wearing my rabbi hat. I'm wearing my spirituality hat.
All right. I'm in my pajamas, so is there halacha against that?
Enjoy. See, isn't that the funny thing? The covering the hair is much more important, because that's going to bring the blessings for your kids.
I'm covered. I'm in pajamas, but I'm all covered.
I remember once a woman came to me. She had received a prognosis, a horrible prognosis about the baby she was carrying. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to say the words of what the doctors told her about this baby. Horrible. And I said to her, you're going to create a miracle because your connection to God is going to create a miracle and this baby is going to be healthy. And, and I never met her before in my life. And I was told she was religious, but as I spoke to her, I realized it was like, a little shaky. And I spoke to her very strongly about covering her hair. And she was wearing pants. And I said, wearing pants, like, that's a separate issue. You should wear skirts, but that's got nothing to do with the kid. But covering your hair, that's going to bring health to your child. So there was like 4 very strong things I told her that all were connected to her child and to health. And she seriously committed to all 4. And her baby was born perfectly healthy.
Oh, good. Oh, wow.
Yeah. She created the miracle. So there's the letter of the law and there's getting those blessings from God. And that's what we go for.
Where exactly does it say it in the Torah?
Does it say what?
to cover your hair?
So that's a great question.
I mean, is it Isha Sota? Like where?
So the strongest, well, the clearest pasuk is the Isha Sota, exactly.
Right.
And then at that same time, obviously it's not written in the Torah, but in the Medrash that's usually quoted is where it speaks about when there was the rebellion of Kairach. In the original psukim discussing the rebellion, one of Korach's chief henchmen, he had like three, and one of them, their name was On, the son of Peles, On ben Peles. And the question is that later, that was the original rebels. But then when they come to gather to literally create this argument, to create the revolution, On ben Peles isn't there. And the question is, where is he? So the Medrash answers that On ben Peles had a very wise woman, very wise wife, and she knew that whoever went to this rebellion would be doomed. But she also knew she couldn't tell that to her husband, of course. So she sat, it says, this is what it says in the Medrash. She sat in front of her tent with her hair uncovered. And when the messengers of Kairach, these sinners who all died that day, who were the rebels, when they came to get On ben Peles for the rebellion, and they saw a woman in front of the tent with her hair uncovered, they ran away. So they never came and got him. So he wasn't part. So he didn't die with the rest of them. So it's just so interesting to see, again, what the sinners looked like, what the rebels looked like, that they would not go near a tent where they saw a woman with her hair uncovered. So that's where we see that, yes, already in the time when the Jews were in the desert, very clearly the women were covering their hair. Anyway, thank you for everyone that got on. So Yael told me it's a very hard night. I thought tomorrow night would be hard, but she said tonight everyone's traveling and everyone's, I guess, preparing their turkeys. So thank you for joining. So we are going to do the third and final section on the idea of charity today. I also want to speak about the Parsha, and I also want to share at least one thought on Hanukkah. Next week, I figure we will not have class because next week I assumed everyone's going to be busy with Hanukkah parties and their children and all the wonderful stuff we do to make Hanukkah so special for our children. So let us speak about today. The last thing we did last week was we were talking about the highest level of charity, according to Maimonides. And we said the highest level of charity, when we had the beautiful example of Yael's father and what Dina said, of helping someone stand on their own 2 feet. Nobody really wants to take charity. I mean, nobody healthy really wants to live on charity. People want to feel like I'm a mensch, I'm a person in my own right. I'm self-sufficient. I can take care of myself. So the best thing you could do is give someone a job. Give someone the ability that they can support themselves. And that was the highest point of charity. And it was so nice that we got those personal stories last week from Yael and from Dina to really flesh out that this is not something theoretical in the works of Maimonides. This is something practical. And guess what? We can all do it today, or some of us can do it, or we could try to do it. We see a situation, we can speak to someone. And I'm speaking to a woman now, and whatever situation is going on in her life, I'm encouraging her. Here's how you get skills, how you create the ability to support yourself. That's, of course, something we want to do for anyone in those situations. So these laws of charity are really important. They're actually so important that even Noachides are allowed to learn them. Noachides are not allowed to learn everything in Torah. There's a lot of Torah they're not supposed to learn. But anything about charity they can learn, even the most highest levels of charity they can learn, because it's such a fundamental commandment for the Noachides even as well as for us. It's that embracive that God truly wants everyone to be giving charity. And as Yael said, I called it a Nacha story, that she and her son are learning the same thing. She in our class, he in the Talmud, in the Gemara. So she said, yes, this is legit. It's exactly what it says in the Talmud. God does say when you give the charity, that money is creating the rest of the money. And this is truly the only area we're allowed to test God. And we had beautiful stories last week. I was so excited from class last week because it was so nice to see in real life that people really see in their lives. And I for sure see in my life how charity literally creates money, and we need more money. More charity creates more money. Charity is compared to a korban, an offering brought in the temple. Now, that's pretty impressive that, wow, it's like a carbon, which it is. And you don't really have commandments today that are compared to a carbon. Of course, our prayers are in lieu of the carbon. When we pray in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, that's in the stead of the carbon. But we don't have a mitzvah we do that we say this is just like offering a carbon to God, just like offering an offering. What is charity. Now, what's the commonality of charity and a carbon and an offering in the temple? So it's an interesting commonality. In the temple, they would offer daily offerings, animals, flour, incense, oil, wine. When these were offered, we're told that spiritually, this offering elevated the entire kingdom. So when you offer that one animal, and they offer that one animal in the morning, the Tamid Shel Shachar, the entire animal kingdom is elevated. When they offer that handful of flour, the entire vegetation kingdom was elevated, literally, because this was representative of the whole kingdom. That's how it works with charity and us. And again, it only works this way if you give a percentage. So this is high motivation. We've already had others. We spoke about Mashiach and the impact connecting to a percentage, taking all your work and the impact connect to percentage. So this is another motivation to make sure, as I'm sure you all do, you give a percentage, 10% better, 15, 20, whatever you're giving, make sure it's a percentage, because then when you earned your $1,000 and you gave 100 to tzedakah, you gave the 100 became godly, but the other 900 is elevated. That money sitting in your pocket, sitting in your bank account, probably already spent, is elevated because, again, it's the whole kingdom from which this percentage is offered on the altar of God. That one animal was offered and the entire animal kingdom is elevated. The percentage of money is offered, it's sacrificed, it's given away, and the entire total sum, the whole kingdom, all the money you earned is all elevated because it's coming as a percentage. And it's, again, a very critical reason why, because I know some people are like, I always give. First of all, they probably are not giving as much as they think they're supposed to, but as they're supposed to. But a lot of people say, I always give. There's always causes. People are always asking for money. I just give when people ask. I know I'm for sure giving the money I need to give. It's not the same. You want to cut a percentage, either, on a ledger, on a piece of paper, having a separate account, however you do it. And then you make sure you're literally giving that percentage, and it's a percentage, so the whole is elevated. Now, the Baal Torah has a very interesting thought on charity. And he says, it's a very strange word we use, because in English we say charity. But the translation for charity, to be charitable, to do charity, is chesed. That's not our word for it. We call it tzedakah. Tzedakah, from the root word tzedek, doesn't mean charity. Tzedek means, anyone? What does tzedek mean?
Righteousness?
Righteousness, justice.
Justice.
Exactly. Tzedek tirdof, right? Justice. So it's very interesting because, in English, we say charity because we want to know what we're talking about. But the Rebbe says, why are we calling it tzedakah? Tzedakah means justice. And charity means like doing chesed. But we don't call it chesed, we call it tzedakah. And it's the name itself is the message. The message is, don't think you're being such a nice guy, like you're such a wonderful person that you're giving some money to someone else. I'm so charitable. Understand, it's tzedek, it's justice. The money we give to charity is not ours. God is using us as his messenger to distribute to others. And we're very blessed that God trusts us and chooses us to be his representatives. There's a very strong story with, it's a Hasidic story, not in the Chabad Hasidic dynasty, but it works. Dina, do you have a question?
I do.
Sure.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
No. How else are you
you
supposed to ask a question besides raising your virtual hand? I cut myself off.
So I I did hear recently that there are halachos of how much it can give, and then I heard like that that's for like charity, let's say to the poor, to the needy, and then there's you can give a lot more to specifically learning Torah or I just don't know like what are the limits? Are there any?
So we discussed this last week. You were on last week. Maybe came on a little late. I think Shira asked this. Shira mentioned this in the beginning of last class. It says in the Gemara, "Hamibazbez al yibazbez yoser mechoinish," which means that one who's going to squander his money in charity, which is an interesting term. Or say you say squander or give charity. Don't squander more than 20%, meaning the minimal amount to give charity is 10%. Now, you're right, of course, that there's charity and there's other things. Like a lot of times we sort of lump everything as charity, but charity itself is 10%, and you want to give more, that's great. Give 12, give 15, give 18, give 20. More than 20, no. So I said last week in response to Shira raised the issue that starting from the Baal Shem Tov, all of the Rabbeim, continuing in the Chabad dynasty for sure, all say there's no cap. And the Baal Shem Tov, I said last week that why does the Gemara use this unusual expression? We're talking about charity. We're not talking about squandering. You're not going into Nordstrom's, you're not blowing it in Starbucks. You're giving charity. Why are we saying squandering? So the Baal Shem Tov says it's to imply mibazbez is from the root word biza. Biza means like the spoils of war. So the Baal Shem Tov says that if it's a big battle for you, it's a fight to give charity, it's so hard for you to give away your hard-earned money to someone else, don't push yourself more than 20%. But if you love to give charity and you're enjoying and you have pleasure in giving to others, the Baal Shem Tov says you shouldn't have that pleasure. You have lots of other pleasures in life. Why shouldn't you have a pleasure in giving charity? That's the Baal Shem Tov. The Alter Rebbe, 2 generations later, takes it a step further. And he explains that when the Gemara says, don't squander your money, it's talking about people that have no sins on record. So their charity is purely for others. But the Alter Rebbe says, for the rest of us that have sins on record, we give charity as the medicine to cure us from our sins. Like there's a generic medicine called chicken soup, or might call Tylenol, or so the generic medicine for all sins is charity. Charity cures us of our sins. So if you have no sins on record, give 20%. That's enough. But if you have any sins on record, the Alter Rebbe says, give more and more and more, because it's your medicine. And the Rebbe says, you're not going to spend the money you need on your own medicine. We don't, and the Rebbe quotes a verse that whatever it takes, we'll spend if it's for our own medicine. So if charity is your medicine, there's no caps. And all of the Rabbeim after the Alter Rebbe there are many quotes from them continually to bring out the idea of giving 20%, or the Alter Rebbe says give more than 20%. And again, it's not to put a pressure on anyone. Like, if someone's giving 10 and that's really, hard for them, and they can't make that leap of saying, if I give more, I'll actually have more money, that's fine. But it's probably a twofold thing. On one hand, it's so important to God. And as we explained, it's the strongest time efficient way to bring Mashiach. It's the strongest, most time efficient way to elevate your animal soul. It's the strongest, most time efficient way to elevate the world. And that's why God says, test me on it. It's the only thing you can test me on, because I really need you to do it. So maybe that's one level of why we should give more and more and more. And on the other hand, the other side of the coin is it gives us so many blessings. There's so much we get from charity. Last week, we focused a lot on money because that is the gift of charity, is that it creates money. The percentage we give creates the whole. But of course, there's also many other things we know. There's many other blessings that are connected to charity. And that's why in general, if someone has a problem, the go-to is Tehillim and charity. So for that same reason, if it's going to help save a situation, you're going to say, no, I don't think I should give more. So I think for those 2 reasons, there's such a emphasis on giving more and more and more and more. And because we have this promise from God that you'll just come back to you, there should never be a sense of like, well, I can't, I'd love to, but I can't afford it. We have to trust God and know that he wants us to have a lot of money. So he wants us to give a lot of charity. So the story is told. Again, this is a Hasidic story with a Rebbe. If you ever heard of the Rebbe of Apt, Rabbi Yeshua Heschel of Apt, Rabbi Yeshua Heschel of Apt. So he had a follower, a Chassid, who was fairly wealthy for those days. And he would contribute regularly to all of his Rebbe's causes, and his Rebbe would send him requests, and he would send money. It was a nice relationship. Once he received a letter from his Rebbe asking for a very large sum of money in those days, like 200 rubles. I don't know if it was exactly 200 rubles. You know, this happened a few hundred years ago, but whatever. That's the amount we're saying, like a large sum of money. And at that time, his businesses were not doing too well, and it would have been very, very difficult. And he thought about it and he said, I'm going to take a pass. I mean, I'm always very generously contributing to all the causes, but just this one cause, I'm going to take a pass. Okay. So he never responded to the letter. And what did he see? Boom, boom, boom. He loses everything. He literally, a few weeks later, is done, bankrupt. And he understands why it happened. And he remembered. He got the letter, 200 rubles, a lot of money, not good timing, didn't respond. And suddenly, boom, 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 he loses everything. So he was like, what is going on? So he travels to his Rebbe, to Apt, and he goes in for a private audience. And he says, like, Rebbe, I don't understand. I know I didn't give you the money you wanted, but like you punished me so much, like I should lose everything. I mean, if you just pushed a little more, I would have given you the money. Like, what'd you do this for? So the Rebbe said, you weren't punished. Nobody punished you. What do you mean I wasn't punished? I lost everything. Everything. I'm done. I was tremendously punished. He says, no, you don't understand. This is what the Rebbe told this follower of his, this chassid. The Rebbe said, when my soul came down to earth, there's a number of Jews I'm supposed to be taking care of on many levels. I'm supposed to be taking care of them spiritually, mentoring them, guiding them, teaching them, and helping them physically. But like, I'm a busy person, so to speak. I'm saying it in my words. I can't do all that. So what God did is he took a few of my followers and he made them my bankers. And he gave them the money that when I need money, I can get it from them instead of having to deal with it myself. You were one of my bankers. But when you didn't send the money, you were telling God that you weren't interested in being my banker anymore. So God said, fine. He transferred the account to someone else. So that's a very strong story to bring out this point, but it really is in essence how we should always view charity. We're God's bankers. God gave us the money and he's trusting us that we're going to share it with everyone who needs it. So this perspective on money is very different than the rest of the world's. Meaning, if you look in the world around you, the non-Jewish world, there's basically two perspectives on this charity issue. You have those people that think the more money you have, it's yours. I mean, you worked for it, you earned it, you're more successful, you were born to the right family, and you choose to share it. Wow, whew, that's so special of you. You have tremendous amount, you're sharing a little bit. We still appreciate it. It's very, very special because why should you share anything? That's how some people view charity. Of course, other people from the socialist, communist, political party systems would say, what are you talking about? It's the biggest wrong. It's the biggest evil in the world that some people have a lot and some people have a little. That's wrong. If you have a lot, that's wrong. And you should, of course, distribute what you have so everyone should have, because how dare you? Why should you have more than anyone else? So those are two very opposing perspectives on the idea of giving money to others. And Judaism doesn't believe in either. We don't believe like, wow, you're so amazing that you share. And we don't believe it's so wrong of you that you have more. That's not the Torah perspective, neither view. The Torah perspective is giving charity is a mitzvah. It's a commandment. And it's a good deed, which means on one hand, it's not voluntary. It's a duty. It's an obligation, as we're saying, at least that basic 10% of your net is an obligatory. But on the other hand, it's a good deed because you're carrying out your obligation. And because it's difficult for some, not for everyone, of course, as we discussed last week, and for some people, it's their easiest mitzvah, it's their go-to mitzvah. But for some, it is difficult. To make it your children's easier mitzvah, show them your modeling of doing it, because you could be sort of like, you don't want to show off and you don't need your kids to know what you do in this area, but it actually is very good for your children. I remember we discussed last week at length this idea of how do we help our children for them to have a healthy perspective on money. So it's very good for your children to see how you give charity. So then they just get it naturally. So they don't have to struggle with it. So material wealth is not a crime. It's a blessing from God. And if you're blessed, and we all hope they're blessed to a certain degree, we should view ourselves, like the story, as God's banker. I'm privileged to be entrusted by God with his role of dispensing the resources of his creations to others. God is supposed to dispense his resources to others. And God is choosing me. God is choosing you to be his shliach, to be his emissary. The person that's getting the money, they don't get it from you, they'll get it from someone else. God runs the world. He wants them to have that money. But you're so fortunate that he's trusting you to be that person. And it's really interesting because you can say, and of course, this is actually also discussed in the Gemara, why didn't God just do it straight? He gives me the money to give to others. I mean, by the same token, he could have made sure that everyone gets the money they need directly. Why do we have to go through this whole charity system? But that's what he wants people in his world to be. He wants us to be people that give to others. So he created the concept of having and the concept of need. So we change and we become givers. And that's why in Jewish law, there's a very interesting halacha. There's a very interesting law. And the law is that even a person who is supported by charity has to give charity. Now that's a weird one. Here you are. You have no money of your own, no handouts from the government. So how are you surviving? By your fellow Jews that are supporting you. And you're supposed to take from the money they give you to support you and give your 10% to someone else. Well, why are you doing that? And you'll just need more money for them to need to give you more money. Because God's saying, I'm not just doing it for the other person to have money. I'm doing it for you. I want you to become a person who gives. I want you to be a generous, loving, giving individual. So I created a system where there's people that have and people that have needs. And here we have the dynamics between the two, and that changes you. So you have to be a person that has the need and is receiving. So you should also have the opportunity to be a giver. You should also have the opportunity to be a generous person. Generosity is a state of mind. It's not a state of your bank account. So therefore, even a person that is supported by charity has to give his charity to others. And what happens when you do? We're told when you do, you become God's partner in creation. You and God are partners because God really has a need to support this person, but you're partnering with him. So you're supporting the person for him as God's partner. So that's an amazing thing. If we think of charity as like my opportunity to be God's partner. Now, we're talking about charity, but just talk about the idea of being God's partners. Does anyone have any other commandment they do, a mitzvah that's close to their heart, that when they do it, they feel like God's partners? They feel like they're God's partner in creation? Our sages say about one other commandment that I don't think you're going to guess, but I'm just wondering if on a feeling level, there's anything you do that you really feel like you and God are partnering here.
Would it be like bringing children into the world?
So I was just thinking that someone's probably going to say that because that is true as well. I wasn't thinking of that in the legal sense, but in the spiritual sense, yes, we are told that whenever you have a child, the child has three parents, the father, the mother, and God, and Hashem. And the three are partnering with the child, with creating the child. So that's why whenever you have problems with your children, you turn to God and you remind him he's the third partner. He's an equal partner. He's got to pull his weight also. So yes, that is definitely a time when we're partnering with God. Anyone else have any things that they feel this idea that they're God's partner with? Okay, it was just a question. Our sages say actually it's Friday nights. When you say in the prayers Vayichulu after the Shemona Esrei Friday night, which is actually one of the reasons why we're told it's actually something women should also say, the Friday night prayer, even if you generally don't have in Ma'ariv, but Friday night is very important because as we proclaim Vayichulu, as we proclaim God's creation of the world, it's like we're partnering with God in creation. That's the legal background to that prayer. But definitely on an emotional level, I think what Dina said, probably for many of us, giving birth is a very godlike moment, and we can really understand we're God's partners in that. Giving tzedakah is also supposed to be a humbling experience. Why is it a humbling experience? Because here's a person who has less than we do, and God could have just helped him directly to have what he needs. But God instead chose that we should be his messenger. It's sort of humbling to understand when you look at your possessions, they're not really mine. They're someone else's. There may be some worthy institutions, some poor person, some cause. There's so many causes out there. I'm just the person that's supposed to be disbursing these funds. I'm entrusted with them to get them to their real destination. So when, because of course, it's very easy to look at our possessions and from that to have a sense of self. And Torah wants us to look at our possessions and have a sense of humility, to feel humbled that God chose us to be holding these things for him. And again, for many people, giving tzedakah, giving charity is not a humbling experience. They can feel it's very an ego experience. And yet we're being told, no, it's supposed to be a humbling experience. Did anyone ever have that? Like a humbled feeling when they gave tzedakah, when they looked at the other person and they realized they have more and they're supposed to be giving them? When they looked at what they have and they realized it's all from Hashem and it's all to give to someone else? Did anyone ever have such an experience with tzedakah? It might feel a little counterintuitive. Like it might feel like, no, actually, when I feel give tzedakah, I feel very good and very big, not very humbled. But it's really supposed to humble us. I mean, did anyone ever have the other end and feel a sense of self that they were able to give tzedakah, that it made them feel better as a self, raise their self because they were giving tzedakah? Because that, definitely can happen. But obviously our goal is, if we really look at the money and really realize God gave this to me to give to someone else, it's a humbling experience. So I don't know what tzedakah will be like by Mashiach. I was sort of wondering, because obviously by Mashiach, everyone's gonna have all their needs met. But at the same time, we're gonna be in some fashion giving tzedakah. So I don't know, and I never saw anyone that spoke about this idea of tzedakah in the era of Mashiach. I guess we'll find out. Maybe it will be tzedakah in terms of knowledge of God, because of course, when you have knowledge and you share knowledge with someone else, that's also a form of tzedakah. Maybe it will be like we were mentioning last week, just preparing food and helping other people. I don't know, but I can't imagine something so special to God, special to God's heart, like tzedakah will be obviated by Mashiach. But at the same time, everyone will have their needs. So we'll see. Dina?
I had this, I've heard somewhere in the past and it stuck with me. I don't know if I understood it correctly though. I heard that Kabbalistically, when you give every amount you give to tzedakah, it equals out money given towards a cause that's anti-God.
You mean it's balancing it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know. I can't comment on that because I never saw that anywhere. I'm not saying it's
Okay.
wrong. There's lots of
Okay,
things I don't know,
yeah.
but I never saw
I just heard
anywhere.
it. Was wondering if that was a thing.
I never saw, I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying I honestly never saw it, which
Okay.
doesn't mean anything. All right. So that was what I wanted to conclude with Staka. So we did 3 classes on it, which was amazing because it's so relevant to all of us, wherever we're holding in the Staka spectrum. And I was so glad that we were able to do it. And now I'd like to take the time remaining to touch on 2 ideas of the Parsha and then an idea on Hanukkah. As I said, I assume next week, obviously this week we have a smaller class because of people traveling for Thanksgiving. And next week, I'm assuming people are gonna be busy with Hanukkah parties. So we will pick up in 2 weeks. So 2 small ideas from the Parsha. Obviously, when I look at the Parsha, I'm always like, whoa, there's so much here. And there's so many amazing ideas. And what, like it's like, you're at a smorgasbord. What do you eat? I mean, of course, you want to eat everything, but what are you going to eat? Eye it and then pick out something. So I'm eyeing the Parsha and just selecting like 2 nice ideas that we can think about and I thought were relevant. So this week's Parsha is Parshas Vayeshev. You want to impress your children, and you want to share your Divrei Torah at the table and inspire them that they also should always have thoughts of Parsha, not just when they're in school, not just during the school year, not just when their teachers are telling it to them. They should also want to live with the times. Living with the times means lives with the Parsha. So your shining example is really modeling for your children, even if they roll their eyes and don't look impressed, still, trust me, it gets in. We've spoken about Rabbi Akiva's rock with that perfect hole because drop by drop by drop, the waters pierce the rock. So we are drop by drop by drop, piercing and creating a relationship with God that what we have, we're gifting to our children. So in today's portion, actually, in Wednesday's part of Parshas Vayeshev is the very involved story of Yehuda and Tamar. And of course, has many, 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 many levels of what's going on there. It's very, very strong story, a lot going on. But I just wanted to pull out what I thought was this really amazing, powerful, practical lesson that I thought was so relevant to all of us. So here we have, I mean, I'm sure you all know the story, but just to remind you, here we have Tamar, very righteous woman, who knows she's supposed to give birth to the descendant, to create the descendants of Yehuda. And she marries and he messes up and God kills him. She does Yibum and marries Einan, and he messes up and God kills him. And Yehuda says, my gosh, this woman, she looks really righteous, but I don't know. She's the type of woman that her husbands die. I don't know what to do because I'm supposed to do Yibum. I've got 1 kid left. I don't want him to die also. So he says to her, like, go wait in your father's house till she came from a very illustrious lineage. Her father was Shem ben Noach. Go wait in your father's house till Sheila grows up. Okay. But then he started growing up, and then he was old enough in those days to get married. And she saw, hey, Yehuda's not giving me Sheila, and she understood why. And she's like, no, I know I'm supposed to create. Like, she was a very holy woman. She knew she's supposed to create the next, the lineage, the descendants, what was ultimately the line of Mashiach. And so she concocted this whole plot of dressing up like a prostitute, going where she heard Yehuda was, getting from him his ring, his signet ring, his cloak, and his staff, having relations with him, and then disappearing. And she did it for a very specific goal, that she should become pregnant, that she should carry his seed. That was exactly why she did it. And she knew what would happen, which is exactly what happened. About 3 months later, they realized she's pregnant, she was showing. She obviously wasn't so heavy. So 3 months later, they already saw, and they're like, whoa, she committed adultery. Why are they assuming she committed adultery? Because when a woman's in this state of waiting for a Yibum relationship, it's like she's tied into this family, if you will. She can't have relationships with anyone else. So what she did wasn't adultery, because she had relationships with Yehuda, but nobody knew that. So, she didn't have relationships with Sheila, so obviously it was someone else, and that's forbidden. So she just committed adultery. In other words, just as if she had been married and committed adultery. That's what it's viewed, a woman who is waiting for a Yibum, or in that matter, Chalitza. It even happens today. I heard on Shabbos about a woman who had to wait years for this chalitza ceremony. She wasn't allowed to get married to anyone else in the interim. That's the law. So they say to Yehuda, well, your daughter-in-law Tamar, she committed adultery. She's pregnant. He said, okay, well, she has to die. That's the law. And she's the daughter of the priest. Shame. She has to die by burning. What does Tamar do? Tamar sends a private messenger to Yehuda. She sends in a package his ring, his staff, his cloak, and she sends a message. To the man who possesses these, I became pregnant. That was it. That was all she said. What did she mean? What she meant was, it was you, which therefore means I did not commit adultery. This was fulfilling Yibum, and I'm kosher, as are the children. She was expecting twins. But she didn't say that. She didn't say to the people when they are literally taking her to die, no, I'm innocent. I had relationships with Yehuda. I can prove it to you. I have his 3 items that he gave me. She didn't say that. She sent Yehuda a private messenger. What was her point? It would be embarrassing. You know, people don't know all the godliness behind it and the whole scoop that we know that we read in the Gemara and the Midrash. They just are, you know, going to talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Says, I can't embarrass someone else. If I don't embarrass him and he doesn't say anything, I'm going to die. Okay. I can't embarrass him. From this, our sages learned, if you ever were taught this concept in school, better a person should throw himself into a fiery furnace and not embarrass someone else. This is the source. Because that was, so to speak, literally what was supposed to happen. She was supposed to die by fire. 3 souls, her and the twins inside of her. They were all supposed to die. And if Yehuda hadn't said something and said, yes, she's pregnant from me, she is kosher, she would have died. But she wasn't going to embarrass him. She was going to let him make the choice. And I was just, you know, this is, again, I didn't say any big novel thought here. Probably most of you know this idea, but it's just so powerful if we really understand how God wants us to act, what it means to be a person, a godly person. Obviously, Tamar was a very, very holy woman. I mean, she was holy enough to know she's supposed to have his child. She was holy enough to know this is going to be the line of Mashiach. So it was a very high level behavior, a very high level person. But that's not what our sages say. Our sages say from this, we should all learn how to behave. There's a very high level behavior of a very high level person, and we should all take from this as a lesson how careful we have to be not to embarrass anyone. If you would even just apply it to your husband and your children, that would be amazing. Amazing. You just don't let yourself say that hurtful comment that would embarrass the spouse, the child, people in our world. Our mouths are very quick. It's a very, very powerful thought. That was one idea from the parsha.
Wait, Mrs. Turin.
Yes, yeah.
How is it kosher? She slept with her father-in-law. She was
It was
promised his
kosher.
son, not to him.
Okay, so it was, I mean, no problem. It was kosher because in those days, I mean, it was 100% kosher. This is the line of Mashiach. It was and you know, everything, a boss call came out and said it, you know, like says, no, there's no argumentation in the Gemara about it. Like a lot of things in the Gemara we have argumentation on. Here,
Yeah.
there's no dissenting voice. Everyone agrees it was 100% kosher. It was 100% kosher because you can look at it from her side and from his side. From Tamar's side, she right now is waiting for Yibum. I mean, or for that matter, legally, it could have been Chalitza, which is, of course, the ceremony that disengages her from the family. But
Right.
officially, Yehuda claimed Shayla would marry her, and then it would be Yibum. And that's the better option. Obviously, today we don't do that. Ashkenazim haven't done it for hundreds and hundreds of years. Sephardim stopped about 100 years ago from doing it. But nobody does it today because we're not on the level to do it. But biblically, Yibum is a much better option. Now, from the time when the Torah was given, we limited, well, even then, I can't even say that, because if you look in the story of Rus, Ruth's marrying Boaz was Yibum. And Boaz, and it's all written in the story there, Boaz was trying to convince Tuv to marry Ruth, because that would be an even better Yibum. Tuv, I mean, I don't know how much you do or don't remember the story of Ruth, so just to explain the genealogy, Ruth's husband, she had been married to a man who died. They didn't have children, but he was capable of having a child. So there should be Yibum or Chalitza. There was no living brothers because his only brother also died. The only male relatives in this family were an uncle, whose name was Tuv, Elimelech's brother, and a cousin, whose name was Boaz. So the uncle was considered first in line before the cousin. It's a closer relationship. So Boaz, who happened to be the shofet, the judge of the Jewish people, was trying to convince Tuv to marry Ruth to do Yibum. When he refused, Boaz said, okay, I'll do Yibum because I'm the cousin. It's only me and you, nobody else. So even then, so what I was going to say is actually not correct. Even then, in those times, which are the times of, I mean, post-biblical, the times when the Jews were already in Eretz Yisrael, and the times of the Shoftim, still Yibum was more considered a family thing. At a certain point, the sages limited it to the brothers. So for the past, I don't know, however many thousands of years, Yibum only applies if there is a living brother. If there is no living brother, there's no issue of Yibum, there's no issue of Chalitza, we're done. If
Isn't
there's a
it the
living
one?
brother, even a living brother who's much younger, like I was just heard this case on Shabbos, a situation that happened right now, I mean, so to speak, in our world, in our times, if there's any age of a living brother, then that brother has to do, I mean, nowadays we don't have to Yibum, has to do Chalitza. So in Tamar's situation, sorry, I just gave that as background to properly answer your question. So in Tamar's situation, the best Yibum option was Shelah, because that was the brother. But she saw, he's not going to give me Shelah. I mean, Yehuda was coming from the perspective of, this is a woman whose husband's died. I don't want to give my only remaining child to her. But for some reason, he didn't say, and I don't know why, because obviously God runs the world. So God didn't put in his head to say, forget it, just do Chalitza, we're done. He didn't feel comfortable to say that, whatever was going on. So she's waiting. Shayla's whatever age is of age in those days. And he didn't become her husband. So she knew she wasn't going to get Shayla. At that point, the next closest relative to her dead husband was his father, Yehuda. So yes, her father-in-law was the next one in line for Yibum. So from her perspective, it was kosher, 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 to the degree that she literally put her life on the line. She went to have relationships. It wasn't a desire to have relationships with Yehuda. It was specifically to create a child. And if she creates the child, she'll be suspected of adultery and will be killed unless Yehuda stops it. And she still did it. So for her, no question. The question, if you have a question, we know what was going on in her head. The question was what was going on in Yehuda's head.
Well, he slept with a prostitute.
That's the question. And we're talking about Yehuda, who was, again, no dissenting voices. You can read the Gemara yourself. It's in Gemara Sota with lots of details. No dissenting voices there, which is unusual. In the Gemara, everyone's dissenting. No dissenting opinions. Yehuda was 100% a tzaddik. So how does a tzaddik sleep with a prostitute? So first of all, the Chumash tells you that at this point he wasn't married to anyone, though that's actually irrelevant legally. But just to make it even cleaner, his wife had passed away. But again, that's not a necessary prerequisite, but just in those times, obviously. But there wasn't even anyone else around in his life. And he's walking by this prostitute. Kabbalistically, it's explained, but I think it even might say that, actually it says it in the Gemara also, I believe, that Hashem, godliness, not the force of evil, put this enormous, unable to be understood, unable to be stopped desire for him to have relations with his prostitute. Now he's like, what's going on? I can have relationships with a prostitute. Everything in his body was saying he had to have relationships with this woman who can't even see. He didn't see her. She was totally covered over. And he's just feeling he has to have relations with her, but he's a religious person. So it says in the Gemara, he went over to her and he started questioning her, not the usual conversation between a man and a prostitute. He said, are you married? She said, no. He said, are you a Nida? She said, no. If you look up in the Gemara, I forget, but there were also a series of questions that he wanted to make sure, is this kosher? Is this kosher? Am I allowed? Am I allowed? Am I allowed? I went through the whole list. Now, what I thought was very interesting when you read this piece of Gemara is, how could he trust her word? She's a prostitute. I mean, he thought she was a prostitute. If you go to a prostitute and say, are you kosher? Are you married? Are you a Nida? No, I'm totally kosher, kosher, kosher. Well, she's a prostitute. Why are you believing her? So in another Gemara, I'm just doing this to answer your question because I understand the question, so I want you to get a full answer. In another Gemara, it speaks about, this is a Gemara of Avodah Zarah, and it speaks about yayin nesach, like the real yayin nesach, wine used for idolatry. I mean, which isn't exactly how we use the term today, but biblically, yayin nesach is wine that was used for idolatrous service. So in this whole conversation in the Gemara, it's speaking about if a zoina was in a room with other people that are idolaters, and afterwards her word is being questioned on was the wine used for avodah zarah, for idolatry. The other people cannot be questioned because they're idolaters, so we won't trust their words. She's a prostitute, but the sages say her word can be trusted. So it's very interesting. I thought it was fascinating that, I mean, she's obviously not a holy woman, but she still has what halacha calls ne'emanus. If she says something, we trust her word. So if you read in the Gemara, it's in the Gemara Sota, Yehuda goes through the whole list of questions to make sure it's kosher. It checks, everything checks. It's okay. I don't know why I'm doing this, but it's kosher, though it seems really strange. And he has this relationship with her. Why was he doing it? Because there's a God that wanted Yehuda and Tamar to create Peretz, who was the ancestor of Boaz, who had another crazy story with Rus, who was the ancestor of David, who had a crazy story of his own birth. And then from there, we have David and Bathsheba to create Shlomo. There's another crazy story. And then we have Shlomo and Naamah, another crazy story, all to bring down the Neshama of Mashiach, which according to Kabbalah, now that was everything I said so far was the Gemara. Bringing in the Kabbalah angle, according to Kabbalah, when we question what is going on, why do we have so many stories that, yes, if you learn them with the Gemara, you find out they were kosher, but they sure don't look kosher? It's explained because each step by step was supposed to bring the Neshama Mashiach into this world. And to get such a holy energy into this world, you're like, so to speak, sneaking it in through the back door, sneaking it in a way that the forces of evil aren't stopping it because they're like laughing and not realizing, so to speak, what's really going on. Obviously, there's other deeper angles of understanding it, the whole idea of elevating the sparks that within the things that look the most evil are such potent, incredibly potent. Incredible evil has incredible energy of godliness. Like Kabbalistically, it's explained that Esav and Yaakov, last week's Torah portion, Esav was far more intently powerful spiritually than Yaakov. I mean, he was incredibly evil. He didn't use it in a good way at all. But in terms of raw power, such evil means such godly energy. Same thing with the arch villains, a Lavan, a Paro, all of them Kabbalistically are explained are super powerful godly energy that was not utilized in a godly fashion. Because to have such evil, you gotta have such godliness. So that's another even deeper level of understanding why God did it through the back door, because each act is going into this place of seeming such evil and extracting the sparks. And those are the most powerful sparks. And that's all creating the redemption, the soul of Mashiach. So that's a long answer to your question because it deserved the long answer.
Okay, I'll buy it. But
I didn't say one lie. Everything I said was
no,
pure
no.
Torah.
If they all knew the Torah, even though Torah wasn't given, they all knew the Torah.
Yes.
Isn't it considered a forbidden relationship for a daughter-in-law to have relations with her father-in-law?
No, I'm telling you, it wasn't a forbidden relationship. It's Yibum. There's nothing
It's
forbidden.
just disgusting.
No. Of course, it sounds disgusting to you. The whole story sounds disgusting, but that's got nothing to do with it. In other words, let me rewrite this. Let me answer Yael's question a different way. Let's rewrite history, which didn't happen this way because we're supposed to go through the back door for all the Kabbalistic reasons I told you. But let's forget about the Kabbalistic reasons. From the law perspective, if Tamar had sent a message to Yehuda and said, Yehuda, I'm a prophetess. I know I'm supposed to have a child from your seed. Obviously, it wasn't from Er, he died. It wasn't from Ona, he died. I mean, they both sinned with her, and that's why they died. I'm supposed to have a child. What do you want? Do you want me to marry Shelah and do even with him and that we can have a child to continue this line? Or do you prefer me to marry you? Either one. If you say no, Shayla, you're scared to give Shayla, will you have relationships with me? Now, actually, she didn't do that because who's she to say that to you? Who then? Who, like, what are you, crazy lady? But in essence, that was, if you want to boil it down to like halacha in those days, absolutely. It's no more, you're saying, oh, father, a brother. It's the same idea. Yibum means you are specifically having relationships with this closest male relative to produce a child who's not really the child of that father, who's really spiritually the child of that dead man. That's actually how our sages explain what was Aaron and Ina's sin. The first two husbands of Tamar, both of whom died. Their sin was that they never consummated the relationship with her. They never had their semen actually go into her. Why not? So our sages say, the sin in Hebrew is called zera levatala, an emission of seed wastefully. So usually that means like masturbation or something like that. Here, literally, they were having relationships, but they never finished it off. Why not? So our sages said, who obviously was not such a good person, he said, I don't want her to get pregnant. She's such a beautiful woman. I don't want her to get pregnant. So I want to make sure she never gets pregnant. I mean, it might be never, never, but for long enough that God said, no, you're a sinner. We're taking you away. So fine. Then he's supposed to do Yibum with Onan, the brother. He was the next brother. And Onan said he didn't have the issue of her getting pregnant and messing up her beauty. He said, I don't want her to get pregnant. She's gonna get pregnant. The kid's not gonna be mine. We're having, and that, which is exactly the reason why thousands of years later, Ashkenazic rabbis and much after that, Sephardic rabbis took away the whole option of Yibum, because it requires a very high level person to do Yibum and literally know that this child is not really yours. This child is spiritually that dead man's child. That's the concept. So you're having a relationship, your husband dies and you want to marry his brother? Yeah, because this is how Torah says that dead man, your husband, can continue in this world through a living child. And in those days, if it wasn't him, next step would be the father. So again, no dissenting voices. There are many things in the Gemara that you have lots of opinions on. Here, no one argues. And you see the proof, because a Bas Kol came out, a heavenly voice came out and said, from me came out this whole situation. It wasn't from Tamar's, scheming, brilliant, whatever. God said, I take credit for it. I was the one that orchestrated it. And the Torah goes on to say, skipping ahead 4 months, because she had the children very early, after 7 months, not after 9, that both of the children, the Torah actually compares it to Rivka, right? Last week's Torah portion, Rivka has 2 twins. Now, Rivka and Yitzchak are completely godly righteous, but one of their twins was Yaakov, one was Esav. But in comparison, by Yehuda and Tamar, both of the twins, Peretz and Zerach, are the 2 twins that were born, both of them were absolute tzaddikim. So there's no greater proof. I don't think you need a proof because Torah says it clearly, but if you wanted a proof, there's no greater proof that what she did was perfectly clean and legitimate and pure in God's eyes, that the children born from this relationship, were both of them absolute tzaddikim. One of them was the ancestor of Mashiach, Peretz, but also Zerach was a complete tzaddik. And when we think of ourselves, and I know we've discussed this, that the thoughts you have, your energy when you're having relationships impacts the energy of the child. And lo aleinu, I mean, children that are born from an adulterous relationship very clearly struggle with that issue the rest of their life. Children born where one of the parents, let's say a father's not Jewish, struggle the rest of their life. Children, it's so clear to see children born from a negative spiritual state literally struggle the rest of their lives. And here, she's having relations with her father-in-law. He thinks it's a prostitute. And what happens? Both kids are absolute tzaddikim. Because this was a very, very godly situation. And why did it happen this way? Because we're bringing down the soul of Mashiach. Yeah, Al, did you have a follow-up question before Shira said that comment?
No.
No. Okay.
But
I was going to say something
today-
else in the parsha. I'm not, because it's 9:18, but I'm going to say briefly one idea from Hanukkah, because maybe I should have spent this whole class on Hanukkah. And I was like sort of torn, but I was like, I want to finish off stucco, not have you learn it in 2 weeks and whatever. When they're like, well, we're talking about stucco, we finish with that. So I thought, let's finish. After Hanukkah, we're going to start a new topic, but at least one idea of Hanukkah. I'll say one beautiful, innovative thought of the Rebbe on Hanukkah. And I'll say it briefly because I know it is late. When the prayer for Hanukkah is Al Hanisim, we say that prayer both in the Shemona Esrei and the Amidah, and we say it when we bench, when we Birkat Hamazon. In the Al Hanisim, we're thanking God for the miracles. And we say, what were the miracles? Many in the hands of few. They were many, we were few. Powerful, in the hands of the weak. They were these armed soldiers, we're nothings with no real weapons. Makes sense, makes sense. Miracle, miracle, happened. And then we say 3 other stanzas that don't seem to make so much sense. Impure in the hands of pure, wicked in the hands of righteous, deliberate sinners in the hands of those involved in Torah. The question here is, and it's a classical question, it's not an original question to the Rebbe. The question is, so what? Yes, the Greeks, I say Greeks, they were Assyrians, but whatever, they were Hellenists, so that's what we call them, the Greeks. It's the exile of the Greeks, even though these were Syrians, Hellenists. They were impure, they were wicked, they were sinners, but what does that do with anything? We're talking about the miracles. And a very long, involved, detailed answer, which I'm not going to be able to flesh out for you. You're just going to have to take it on faith. Or if you want, you can ask me questions and I can answer later. But this is just to say very briefly the thought. Lubavitch Rebbe explains that it makes no sense to say those 3 phrases are talking about non-Jews. Because first of all, there's no miracle. Yeah, that's right. They were wicked, horrible people. But that's not the miracle that we won because they're wicked and horrible. The miracle is that those 3 phrases are talking about Jews. The sad truth in the story of Hanukkah, I happen to be teaching another class, the history of Hanukkah. And it's really intense. It's really painful. And it's very long, it's very detailed. And what's really sad is that all the trouble came from Jews from beginning to end. And it was like 20 years of fighting. The miracle of Hanukkah happened after 3. They had to fight like for another 17 years till they got their independence for 70 years and they lost it again. It was all the Jews. It was all, as we know the term, the Misyavnim, the Jews that became Hellenists. They were the problem. And they continue to be the problem. And after the miracle, during the miracle of Hanukkah, they were the problem. And after the miracle of Hanukkah, they were the problem. In other words, like we would compare the 2 like miracles we have like that. We have Purim and we have Hanukkah. And they're very different. Because by Purim, of course, the Jews had sinned and they didn't listen to Mordechai, which was completely wrong. And they ate from the party of Achashverosh, which was completely wrong. And that's why they had this decree of genocide. But they all did complete repentance. For an entire year, they self-sacrificed and didn't even think of leaving Judaism. They were so pure and holy, and that's why they had the miracle of Purim. That's not what happened by Hanukkah. By Hanukkah, before, during, and after the miracle, the majority of the Jews were sinners. The majority of the Jews were Hellenists. So what is it with the Al Hanisim? And still God saved us. The miracle was how undeserving the Jewish people were. The majority of the Jews were Hellenists. The majority of the Jews were with the enemy. Many of those Jews were brutally torturing, brutalizing the Jews that stayed loyal to God, and God still saved us. And there's a lot of details to say on that, which I don't have time for. I'm saying the more you learn the history, the more you understand what the Rebbe was talking about. Just one, and then the Rebbe applies it practically in terms of Mashiach, and in terms of each person in their own life, and in terms of Baal Tshuva. So I'll just say the Baal Tshuva application is all the same concept. What we see from here is the minority can be the definitive quality. Even though the majority of the Jews were Hellenists, the minority that stayed loyal to God, because of that minority, the total of Klal Yisrael deserved the miracle. The totality of the Jewish people were saved because of the critical factor of the loyal minority. Sort of like if you walk by a perfume shop, you pick up the smell. So even though only a minority of the Jews were loyal to God, but their beautiful smell permeated the entire Jewish people and made the entire Jewish people worthy of the miracle. So the Rebbe connects this, as I said, to how we're going to bring Mashiach to a person's daily life and to Baal Tshuvas. And the Rebbe says that a Baal Tshuva, someone who wasn't religious their whole life, could think, yeah, now I'm serving God, but for so many years I wasn't. I did so many things wrong. I mean, even a person from their whole life can also go through phases and sometimes look back and think, all the time I wasted and the energy I put into all these wrong things. Now I'm okay. Now I'm good. But like, there's a lot of other time in my life. Remember, it's the same idea. The minority impacts the majority if the minority is connected to God. So the same way in the time of the Greeks, the minority of the Jews created salvation for the entire Jewish people. Even if, now get many people that become religious do so at a younger age, so they still have many years ahead of them. So they're not thinking of the majority of their life, they're just thinking of a lot of years, but some people it's later. But whatever it is, the Rebbe says, whatever those years were, all the years, the days, the minutes when you're serving God, that's your real life. That's you really living. And that's going to perfume everything else. That's going to take care of everything else. So even if there were days, weeks, months, years that you were disconnected, don't worry. Because now that you are connected, that's the critical factor, and that will enhance and empower the whole. So that was a beautiful lesson from Hanukkah. There are many, 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 many other beautiful lessons, but that's what we're going to share for now. Hopefully you should have a luminous Hanukkah. It has tremendous spiritual energy. Tap in. It's a time of miracles. So we all always need some miracles in our lives. So it's a good time to try to create miracles, and look forward to seeing everyone in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.